Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Distinguished Dr. Vinayji, distinguished Minister Persad, distinguished Minister Prabhu, distinguished Minister Akbar, ladies and gentlemen, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Afghanistan, Minister of Finance of Afghanistan, colleagues, friends. I'm humbled by the introduction. It is this spirit that makes relationship between India and Afghanistan a special relationship. Tagore, may he rest in peace, give us Kabuliwala. Now you've given us renewed hope and attention. Let me begin with thanks. I would first like to thank Prime Minister Modi, my friend of Afghanistan, for his steadfast attention to nurturing this historic relationship. 1 billion ties, if grown to billions more of hope in common understanding. I would like to thank the Indian people. The welcome that has been given to Afghans in the $1 billion that India committed is an indication of commitment of every Indian to the future of Afghanistan. I would also like to thank Indian businesses. In Mumbai last week, the air corridor that Minister Akbar spoke of resulted in $120 million in contract and close to over $400 million in memorandums of understanding. Indian business, Minister, is very welcome. And on digital India and digital Afghanistan, I'd like to thank Dr. Qayyumi, former president of San Jose State University and currently Minister of Finance of Afghanistan, for having created a very special relationship between the Indian Institutes of Technology and Indian Institutes of Business. One result of what you speak, distinguished minister, is going to be at least 1,000 virtual laboratories for the remotest schools in Afghanistan. We have turned technical assistance on its head by agreeing to have virtual courses where instead of 100, tens of thousands of Afghan young men and women will take courses, will be intensely examined, and then, as a result of that, instead of spending 4 years, will come for 2 months and get joint certificates. This is the new India partnering with new Afghanistan, and there are no limits to understanding. Equally, your remarks on the industry and on commerce and all related aspects. We would like India to consider Afghanistan not just as its own, but as you offered, we see India as a platform for the global world, but we offer also Afghanistan, like the air corridor, now to jump over territory, invest in Afghanistan, and look towards Central Asia and beyond. This is the way to proceed. But I'd like to also thank Indian educational institutions. 15,000, approximately 15,000 Afghans are studying here, forming relationships, forming deep friendships that are going to be enduring. Not only are graduates of Indian institutions of higher learning now serving in Afghan cabinet, they're across the board. A young Afghan who wrote an MA thesis with 93% originality on water resources is now Deputy Minister of Energy and Water in Afghanistan. And the ambassador has just given me a list of over 100 Afghans who have topped the top graders in Indian universities. And as soon as I return, I'm going to invite them collectively and appoint them to key positions across the board. But particularly, I would also like to thank Indian democratic institutions. What India and Afghanistan share is a deep and abiding trust in democratic institutions and the will of the people. I'm here because I'm the elected leader of Afghanistan, speaking in the world's largest democracy and forging relations between two democratic institutions. Dictatorship has no place in the future of Afghanistan, as hopefully will not have violence. So it's a relationship that is a model of what we want to be and forge in the region. But today, there are two contending views on the future of Afghanistan. What are these views? The first is what our relationship with India illustrates, that Afghanistan serves as a platform for regional and global cooperation. Toynbee coined the term for us. He called us a roundabout, a place where ideas, people, goods flow, interact with each other, and inform each other. Throughout, for 2,000 years, we were a roundabout. The contrasting term he developed was a cul-de-sac, where things get stuck, where walls are built, and where exclusion is practiced. Afghanistan firmly believes in becoming a roundabout. But the contending view, that's why there is a war waged against us, is a stage for regional and global instability. Let us understand what is at stake. Afghanistan, by networks of violence, transnational terrorist networks, and transnational criminal networks, the only thing that is offered us is blood, destruction, and more destruction. We need to understand what is at stake today in Afghanistan. What is at stake is the stability of the region and the world. To deliver and realize on the wishes and aspirations of our people, the Government of National Unity has been working relentlessly to ensure that we become an Asian roundabout and a platform for cooperation. Next year is going to be the 40th anniversary of the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. Next year also happens to be the 100th-year anniversary of our independence. When we gained our independence, we were the only country in the region that had both stability and prospects of modernity and growth. Unfortunately, 20th century was extremely cruel to us. We intend to make the 21st century a century of success for us in the region. I speak, despite the fact that I'm 69, for the generation that is below 35. And I'm proud that we have the youngest cabinet in the region. I also speak for the women of Afghanistan. We're extraordinarily proud of our ministers, our ambassadors, but particularly of women social activists. Afghan women no longer need voices of others to represent them. Thank you very much. They can speak for themselves, and they speak clearly with compassion and with conviction. And I salute the Afghan women for their extraordinary courage and determination. As I said in the hall to Minister Akbar, the Afghan women will not be put in a cage again. No one can do that, because they're determined, and God help a person who crosses an Afghan woman. They're very similar to their Indian sisters. What's the nature of the war that is being practiced on us? It is an unrestricted war. What does it mean to be the subject of an unrestricted war? For thousands of years, war conventions. This war is against civilians. This war is against religious institutions. This war is against both secular and sacred spaces. It is a multidimensional war. It's not a war that is just fought in the battlefield. It's a political war. It's a war of intelligence. It's a war of political destruction. Most fundamentally, it's not just a war against the state or the political system. It is now a war against our society. In the past week, the 20th attack on West Kabul by terrorist groups took place. A particularly distinguished group of Afghan men and women who ethnically call themselves Hazaras, and a lot of whom profess to be Shia Muslims, were subjected to attacks. This is a war against our national unity and against our religious freedom and religious accord. We will not tolerate it, we will not allow it, we will contain it, and we will defeat it. Afghanistan's national unity is strength. Every Afghan's belief in the equality of the other Afghan is enshrined in our constitution, as is the equality of Afghan men and women. In order not to make accusations, we ask for an international commission of civil society and retired security sector experts from the world to investigate this crime that we consider to be a crime against humanity. And I hope that the world would respond. We ask for a civil society commission because international bodies are bound by other sets of rules. And the international civil society must be heard of to know what is happening and how to contain it. Let me get to the question that might be on some people's mind and answer it directly, and then allow for questions and answers. The question that is on everybody's minds, given news headlines, is the state of Afghanistan at risk of collapse? Categorically, no. Why? Because we have the forces, the resources, and the public will not to allow for a collapse. We are fighting, and we are fighting for survival. We are fighting for the future, but we are not at risk of collapse. And just let me give you one illustration as that's doing. We have a 40,000 strong commando and special forces. They can reach any place in Afghanistan within 12 hours. State collapse is not in order. The main reason that the war has become unrestricted is that they have not been able to defeat the Afghan security and defense forces. But the cost we're bearing is incredible. Civilian casualties, as well as security casualties, and of course, other casualties of the opponents. What is at stake for us? Simply the lives of our future generations. We are not fighting just for the current generations. We are fighting for girls who are 2 or 5 years old. We are fighting for babies across. We are fighting for those 15,000 Afghans whose families come from the remotest parts of Afghanistan. We are literally fighting for the next 5 generations. Because of what is at stake, it needs to be understood that our historic resilience is not weakened. When Afghans as a nation make up their minds, they have shown they can do the impossible. Let the enemies of peace and order know that this is not a nation that will accept surrender, defeat, or act with cowardice. What is at stake for the region? The very vision that the distinguished ministers have presented and argued about. Of course, I wanted to publicly say your book is one of the best books I've read, so here for the record. Minister Akbar both speaks with such enormous eloquence but writes even more cogently. The region is at the crossroad. South Asia is the least economically integrated region of the world. We need to overcome the past to create a different future. This was not our past. South Asia, for thousands of years, was a region of connectivity. Of course, when you now look from the plain side or from the ocean side, you don't see how Afghanistan and India have been joined. But there's a distinguished British surveyor called Holditch. He wrote a book called The Gates of India. And when you look overland, you see why 3,000 to 5,000 years of history join us together. Because the previous Silk Road, the Trunk Road, the great set of common activities have bound us together. This place, what we call India, Afghanistan, has been a place of networks, a place where pilgrims, traders, Sufis, Jogis, all sorts of people, and of course some armies, have moved forward and interacted. But the rich fabric of the past has been a fabric of networks and activities. In 16th century, trade had insurance. The bills of exchange from 4 parts of Bengal or Hyderabad were not only accepted in Kabul, they were accepted in Bukhara and all the way to Nizhny Novgorod, into Baghdad. A lot of our past is being renewed. A stable Afghanistan will allow uplifting from poverty to prosperity, from disconnectivity to connectivity and shared understanding. This is what Afghanistan and India are practicing. This is where our common vision unites us. But the opposite need to understand also. God forbid, if the networks of violence take over, it would be robbing the region for a generation of connectivity and mutual prosperity and growth. And what is at stake for the world, let's make no mistake. Over 100,000 international troops left. I had the honor of leading the security transition. Today, Afghans have demonstrated that we can defend ourselves, we die for our nation, and we are willing to fight for it. The fight is no longer that of the state. The war is no longer that of the international community. The Afghan people have now become the key stakeholders in this conflict. They are not fence-sitting, they are engaged, and they are actively articulating. And because of this, an inter-Afghan peace is our most significant national priority and part of consensus. A recent survey carried out by a very distinguished Institute of Civil Society that 93% of the Afghans desire peace. Surveys are one thing, behavior is another. Why do we believe that inter-Afghan peace is possible? A very simple, controlled experiment. In the Eid al-Fitr, we declared a ceasefire. We declared it because 2,907 ulama of Afghanistan convened, issued a united fatwa and asked me to declare a ceasefire. And within 4 days, I acted on their request, which fortunately was accepted by the Taliban. What did we learn? The week before, 1,000 Afghans from both sides had died in the conflict. Over 30,000 Taliban came to the cities. Do you think, were they greeted with hatred? Were they lynched? Were they shot at? No. You saw scenes on global television of Afghans joining in celebrations and accepting each other. Afghan women took on these fighters and engaged them in. And an Afghan doctor was treating a Talib in the province of Paktika, and the Talib said, "What's wrong with me?" And the doctor said, "Would you not get angry?" He says, "No." He said, "You're malnourished." And the young man said, "What's malnourished?" He explained to them, "It's relating to your food." And he said, "How can I be not malnourished?" The most important thing we learned from the ceasefire is that the Afghans, as a nation, are willing to forego the past in order to gain the future. 40 years of conflict, 39 years to be exact, could lead to theories that we are not ready for peace. We are not ready for true social peace. But that bold experiment showed that we are indeed ready to embrace the future. It also showed that the ceasefire was 98% implemented. 98% with 2% minor infractions. The Afghan society is a consensus on making peace. It does not have a consensus on the price of peace. We are a stakeholder society par excellence. What does it mean to be a stakeholder society? Consensus cannot be taken for granted. It needs to be renewed. And peace must be an Afghan inclusive peace, not a partial peace. Why is peace with Taliban important? Because if we arrive at peace with Taliban, we can concentrate on counterterrorism in earnest. No matter how long the conflict has gone on for and how much blood is spilled, Taliban are part of the Afghan society. Foreigners, members of Daesh, these international terrorist networks are not. So we need to devise a way to separate the two, and what is internal needs to be separated from what is regional and global. Consequence of this will enable us to embark on the real task that the Afghan society demands. What is that task? Mr. Minister, you spoke of it eloquently. It's the empowerment of the poor. 40% of the Afghans live below poverty line. As to why billions and tens of billions of dollars were wasted is not my task. I was not in charge. But the growth that Afghanistan is witnessing today is homegrown. And so let me answer another simple question that will have profound consequences. Will we be able to pay for our security? Our current security bill is $6.2 billion a year. Our national revenue was 2.4. Will we be able to pay by 2024? Where we've committed to do so? Absolutely. We carried an intense examination for a month, and we have realized that we could do savings of $2.2 billion, and the two remaining buckets are $2 billion for counterterrorism and $2 billion for police and others. Where India again becomes important, and Mr. Minister, thank you for the offer, industry and others, is that the growth of the economy becomes key. And in that regard, what happened in Mumbai and what you, distinguished gentlemen, have offered today enables us to truly develop the underdeveloped resources of Afghanistan. That is the stake that we can make every Afghan a stakeholder in the society, every Afghan a stakeholder in the economy, but the consequence will always be that every Afghan becomes a stakeholder in regional peace, cooperation, in global security and prosperity. It's with that hope that I again thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak to you, to thank the Indian people, the Indian government, and all you distinguished thinkers of India for embracing Afghanistan and a mutual vision of the future where reinforcing actions creates a virtuous circle against the vicious circle that for the past 40 years has prevailed. Jai India, Jai Afghanistan.